Welcome to Adapt and Overcome. We're here with Bruce Linton. So Bruce Linton is the co-founder and CEO of Canopy Growth Corporation. Bruce is also the co-founder and chairman of Canopy Rivers and Canopy Health Innovations. So notably throughout his career, Bruce has been responsible for the acquisition and disposition of nearly $4 billion in business assets. And he's established regular engagement with the World Bank and Asia Development Bank, as well as companies listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, TSX, and TSX Venture. Bruce has overseen over 35 acquisitions in 6 different countries with over 80 billion in total acquisitions. So currently he holds the position of executive chairman for Gage Cannabis, co-chairman for Martello Technologies Group, and co-founder of Rockify, executive chairman for Wolverine Partners Corporation. He's also the chairman of advisory board and Red Light Holland Corporation, non-executive chairman of Oscari Capital, director of MindMed and Canadian Olympic Foundation. He's an active investor with Slang Worldwide Inc. and OG DNA Genetics Inc. Beginning his journey at Newbridge Network Corporation, Bruce went to be part of an establishing team of Cross Key Systems Corporation, of which he was a key member for the NASDAQ TSX IPO. He was a GM and refounder of Computerland.ca, co-founder of WebHancer Corp. Bruce has acted as CEO and director at Clearford Water System Inc., past chairman of the Ottawa Community Loan Foundation, past board member and treasurer of Canadian World Youth, and past member of the board of governors for Carleton University. So please welcome the myth, the man, the legend, Bruce Linton.
The highly unemployable. Currently, I'm like self-employed is my joke.
Yeah. So
unemployed.
Well, I think of you like the Steve Jobs of Canada, right? You founded this, company that basically listed for, tens of billions of dollars, and then got fired from your own company, which is so it's like, you create this baby and then you have to sort of give it away. That's so on that note, I mean, first of all, I want to highlight 3. Speaking of your, Canopy Growth, there's 3 big moments. I mean, I was following you as an investor, long before that, some of my clients were invested in your company. And the 3 moments that got me really excited was, first of all, when Snoop Dogg invested in he became one of your brand representative. So that was a big moment. We saw a big uptick in your stock. And then Constellation Brand Beverages invested $5 billion, and then of course the government of Canada then legislated cannabis in Canada. So all of those were big moments in your previous company, which was pretty exciting. But now looking back at things, I was curious to know, Bruce, if you had to do it all again, would you do anything differently, knowing what you know today?
And you do some things differently for sure, because the shape of the demand curve in Canada is definitely getting bigger, but it took a little longer because of retail not being set up and COVID and things. So you'd probably go slower on some things there, but really stuff like Snoop. So like I don't have much social knowledge about things. What that means is prior to meeting Snoop, I had not actually fully listened to a Snoop song, because I don't actually listen really very often or ever to music. No, music, okay. Period. I'm one of these nerds listening to CBC and talk radio, trying to understand what people are thinking about.
Okay.
And so like actually listening to music is not something I've actively ever done, which is quite regrettable. But the effect is that I have no knowledge of social. So why I wanted Snoop was, on a visible reputation basis, he is a ambassador of many things, one of which is that cannabis is okay for adults to choose. And so when we brought him on, it wasn't because of trying to make a hangout with him or anything. It was because it was prior to the government having implemented the method by which adults were going to have access in Canada. And because we're Canadians, and because most people in the world don't believe politicians will do what they said they will do, we announced him in February, and it wasn't until October the following year until the whole thing came live. And it was intended to be, and turned out to be, a way to tell people we're sure it's happening. And so when you're trying to build brands, you have to think about how do we build momentum on the purpose. And so that was one of the things. And it turned out I really, I found he and his whole team to be extraordinarily professional, engaged, pushed the topic, worked hard, and liked it. And so the other thing with Constellation, you should always, to be disruptive, innovative, aggressive, are very good virtues for someone who's trying to play in a sector that is moving fast and changing. They're very bad, very, very bad features if you're going to get a government job. And so I'm not very employable with the government. So what I wanted was the ability to be super aggressive, and Constellation gave us their first investment was about 500 million. And then about a year later, it was about 5 billion. And the 10 times increase in the amount they invested bought them approximately 10% more than the first investment. So think about getting like 19%, 20%. They got just over 30% for another 5 billion. So it was a pretty good increase here. So what I might change, probably you'd think about how do we put more and more money into science? Because science outcomes don't age badly. If you grow a product and it's not for sale in the right time, you have to write it off. But if you invent things and you control the intellectual property, so things you could invent would be how we made our beverages. You could also invent how do I help like dogs with anxiety? Because tell me if you don't agree. COVID meant three things. We stayed home, we got bored, so we got a puppy. Now the puppy's bigger, and when we go back to work, we're gonna have a problem because puppy thinks you live at home.
I just ordered my puppy about 2 weeks ago, Bruce. So there you go.
There's going to be an epidemic after COVID of dog anxiety when you and others go to work. And you like the dog, so you're not going to throw the dog out with the garbage. Now you're going to figure out what the hell am I going to do with that dog? And there are applications of cannabinoids that will make it diminish its anxiety, not be drugged out of its head, and be happy to have you come home, but not freak out when you're away. So there are things like that you could do in science, which I think are constantly going to have future markets and aren't product driven.
Well, speaking of the health benefits, I mean, I remember hearing you speak for Kiwanis Club of Ottawa, and you were talking about the health benefits of Canopy. And I mean, it's been proven that the great health benefits for those experiencing PTSD, soldiers returning back from the war, and how that nothing was working from these pharmaceutical drugs, but as soon as they tried cannabis, it was like a huge benefit for them to recover from PTSD. So do you want to just talk a little bit about, some of the, the great health benefit, and that's the whole aspect of how you branded, cannabis is by looking at those health benefits.
Yeah. So there are two markets, right? They're just under regulation. One's whether you're having fun, or one is if you're having a better life, a better day. And so in the latter one, you first look at why people buy the product. And our second biggest reason people bought cannabis was to sleep better. And so when you think about what are your options, if you can't sleep, counting sheep isn't on the table. Wine is an okay sleep aid, but it's not really that great. And then you start getting into these benzodiazepine sleep aids, and those things have a lot of knock on them. There are also tens of billions of dollars of revenue to pharma. So now if people are buying cannabis to sleep and the other options aren't great options, why wouldn't you try to make the cannabis formulations so that they're exactly what people want? They work. So now to sleep, should you eat it, drink it, smoke it? What should you do? How much should you have? What formulation of THC to CBD? So that's for the science, and then the branding and the positioning, because at the end of the day, I think we've all learned through COVID, sleep is an important part of mental health and physical health. And so the conversation about sleep is wide open. The topics of cannabis still haven't remedied which is the best combinations to cause you to sleep. Obviously, we learned early that as a benefit comes from a partial THC, partial CBD, so a matching ratio, but their clinical trial is still ongoing to get to the endpoint that says this is the right combo to cause a person of this age and this weight to sleep.
Well, speaking of some of the obstacles too, I mean, there's a big pharma, but there's also that whole during the the 70s about people linked even cannabis to like cocaine and the Mexican drug cartels, and so drugs just got that negative connotation, and there's also the religious right too, like all these obstacles, especially south of the border, against cannabis. Like, what do you think that something that will eventually change, or do you think that will always be an uphill battle?
Well, there's a bunch of things in that bag. So like my answer to when people would say, well, is cannabis a gateway drug to cocaine? I said, well, maybe at the point of sale. So like if you're buying your weed from the guy in the sketchy apartment, maybe he sells more than weed. But otherwise, I don't think you're on the right track. And anybody who gets super upset about regulating cannabis, it's not like we invented this stuff. it existed. And so the only people who should be really, really upset about regulating cannabis are criminals, because the only group it's really bad for are the people who make money illegally. And so I think you can usually win these arguments if you think them fully through. And the number of times people would accost me because, you know, why would you bring cannabis to the market? And my answer was always, you know, the 63-year-old lady, I'd say, like, I understand why you're upset, because you must have a family member who's a hardened criminal and you're worried they're going to make less money and buy you a less good birthday gift. So let's assume that's why you're opposed, because here's why it's irrational to be opposed. It exists in a market. There's no education attached to it. There's no certainty of the product attached to it. There's no safety consideration. And it's sold through channels that may sell other things. And regulation quits ignoring it and puts it into a framework. There's education, taxation, and safety regulation. So the only rational person to oppose what we're doing is somebody who benefits from criminals. And so if you want to talk about that with me, go ahead. And, you know, usually people thought it was nuts, but ignoring anything is about the worst public policy you can have. Yeah. And so that's the only option to regulating it.
So last time we spoke too, you talked a little bit about there may be opportunities with other areas, like other types of recreation. Do you think that's you know, an opportunity, like other types of natural?
Natural or not natural. So where I spend most of my time now is technology and psychedelics. And psychedelics, I don't even like to call them that, because all it is a bunch of molecules that were regulated out of access because they may have caused a hallucinogenic effect. And then in the background, what we got was 30 or 40 or 50 years of pharmaceutical development of products which had a whole bunch of other addictive, death-oriented outcomes. Well, things like psilocybin and ibogaine and even LSD were put on a bench. And so I look at these and say, if they have an effect on the human perception of a circumstance, can they be used in the right titration and delivery mechanisms to cause people to feel better about it? And it's not that I'm a doctor or really, frankly, all that knowledgeable about this space, but when I see fundamentally stupid rules, so to the theme of your gathering, to me, I fundamentally believe that the continuously best opportunity for creating really great businesses and really important outcomes is anywhere where public perception and public policy is about to rapidly change.
And last time we talked, you spoke a bit about even ventilators in old age homes, opportunities and things like that.
Yeah, but as soon as public perception changes, public policy is changing. And so, like, the public perception around mental health has never had a more aggressively open discussion than we've had in the last, say, 10 years. And so now the questions are going to be, what can do better? And it's the same as when we talked about, we're going to have a global reckoning about how do we look after people in long-term care facilities? What are we feeding them? How do they move around? What are their activities? And what are we using to sedate and drug them? And so there's going to be constant opportunities that come out of very big events. COVID's about as big as you're going to get. Now you're going to wonder then, you know, who are the winners and losers? It's the ones ready for the change. Like, I think long-term care living is going to change upside down. And I think it's going to change upside down and everything, as I mentioned. How do they gather? Where do they gather? Who cares for them? What do they eat? How do they get medicated? Those are all questions that are on the table. And so I just think we're living in a time that as you come out of any major disruption event, that's the best time to build great businesses. Hundreds of opportunities right now.
Yeah. And speaking of innovation, you one of the co-founders of Rockify, which was a very innovative company. It basically allows people to profit from renting their own. So I've been renting out my elliptical through your company, and I just got a call message the other day. Someone, but this is the third person that's renting it. I now actually stored at your warehouse now, just because my wife used it like twice and never again. So I was like, I want to make some money with this thing, right? And it's like weighed like 200 pounds. So luckily we had two guys from your company come pick it up. But you know, tell us a little bit about what's going on with Rockify.
It's essentially the idea is that there's a bunch of things that I might want to use but never own or store. There's a whole bunch of things you might have and you should monetize, because if you look in your garage, it's filled with idle money, your basement, your kitchen cupboards. And so the last thing I Rockified out was a 2-person kayak, paddles, the whole shebang. Used it for 2 days, loved it. You know what I don't have to do? Own it, store it, or ruin the planet by making one that I have sit idle by. The person who owned it wasn't using it, and they made $60 to their pocket. Now, the last thing that I put into Rockify is when I bought a boat, I bought way too many life jackets. And life jackets don't store well, but I didn't want to sell them. So I have people taking life jackets almost every weekend for $9 a life jacket for the weekend. Well, guess what? I paid $30 per life jacket. This has been going on for 18 months. So what it is the ability for everybody to find a better balance in what they own, use, and enjoy, and how to monetize that would exist so we don't ruin the planet making more. And it is just starting to really ramp up. And it's had bumps and trying to figure it out. And people say, well, you know, but nobody really wants to do that. You know what? Nobody wanted to get in a stranger's car. Now it's called Uber. Nobody wanted to stay in a stranger's house, Airbnb. Now all we're doing is moving down into the things that I don't want to buy, own, or store stuff. Like I could buy a 2-person kayak. I could go do that. Yep. You know what it's doing right now? Sitting at my house if I did. So I don't want it. I Rockify it.
So what do you think? And like, it seems to be that, you know, there's so much opportunity with Rockify, but it almost like it's not quite, it just needs that tipping point, like maybe like a celebrity endorsement or something. Do you think there's something that's going to kind of be a big uptick? Because weren't you recently, the company wasn't listed on the stock exchange? Then I think it was the NASDAQ or the Venture Stock Exchange.
My intention is to list it on the Toronto Venture Exchange. We were preparing to do that. And sometimes you have problems in a company and you got to fix them. So we had an individual who decided that they like gambling more than they should have, and they didn't have the money. So they just borrow it from the company here and there to the total of like over $1 million. Now they paid it back, but that made for messy accounting. So we just got our financial statements finished about 10 days ago, all clean audit. Now you can go back to the listing. So the thing that will make it uptick is a couple. One is when you're visible on the exchange, but the other is, suppose like maybe you don't need the money, but you had that elliptical trainer and you weren't motivated. Now, how could I get you motivated to let me have all your stuff? Suppose a charity, Boys and Girls Club, you pick your charity. If they were able to say, hey, you know, if you put this in, you can get a tax receipt at the end of the year for every time it's rented out, and we get to have the cash. Would you please do it? And then when they start calling your house as the season changes, they say, we're really looking for snowshoes, cross-country skis, these items. Do you have any extras? And you might put them in and you'd seasonally change stuff in and out. Now you attach that to a celebrity. And suppose celebrities want you to dedicate the cash towards their charities of choice, whether it's kids football, whatever you want. And so a guy like Snoop, he's got charities like crazy. And so you start thinking these things through. And if you have a way to make it easy for people and then make the celebrities attached to traction, not just visibility, I think there's a bunch of things we can do. And so
it sounds like you've figured it all out. You got the matrix solved and you're just ready to implement it.
Well, you just have to think about people's motivation. Like what will motivate somebody who has all the assets? What will motivate somebody who maybe doesn't want to buy them or shouldn't? And so the environmental message is extremely key, because we always worry about how do you recycle and how do you get rid of the cans and the glass? How do you make sure that the landfill site doesn't fill up? One way to do it is think of a paddleboard, you know, those sup boards. Those things are made so they never disappear. The sun can't damage them or they would fall apart when you're on the lake. So everybody who buys one and doesn't use it all the time, the creation of that sup board is the massive environmental disruption, right? It's hugely filled with hydrocarbons and hardened plastics, etc. Rockify means that maybe you need one for every 20 people who were thinking about buying one. There's where the big environmental offset is. Aluminum step ladders. If I showed you my camera at the left of my window, I have 2 stupid aluminum step ladders. The environmental destruction of creating them is the problem. And I use both of them once a year. So they get Rockified out. That's the sort of thing when you think it through. And you know, do you really want to tie up like $140 in a stupid aluminum ladder that you use once a year when you can Rockify for maybe $12, $10? That's the thing where it starts to go. And so we're right now pretty busy trying to put together a few more companies under the umbrella, because sometimes, you know, you need to freshen stuff up. So I'm working on a couple of acquisitions, make it bigger, and then make it list.
Excellent. You know, you've obviously interested in technology. What other technology opportunities do you see, you know, moving forward that could be good investment opportunities? I mean, you mentioned about dogs, and I even thought about that myself. About, you know, God, like now would be a good time to breed dogs, right, with the demand. But what other wood? Because
I think that demand, you're a year late on having puppies. Now you're going to have dog walkers. But I think from a public policy perspective, Mr. Biden has said that he is going to really focus on trying to have a much more green country with a localized on-country supply chain. for energy and carbon controls. That is huge. I don't know what to do about it, but when you say, well, Canada wants to do it, that's okay. When they want to do it. So
they shut down the Keystone Pipeline too, so that was a big move.
Yeah, but so Biden's going to pour tons of cash into a recovery economy oriented at a more green economy. I have no clue where to put my aura in on that. It's not going to be something I do, but it screams at me every day, every time I hear him speak, talking about the carbon controls and more carbon neutral and the greening and the recovery. And they are going to print more trillions of dollars, dump them into the economy that go to businesses. They have already, what did they do under Trump? Like $2.5 trillion. The amount of new capital coming into the system should fund tons of interesting businesses. And I think this is the real time for a lot of these environmental offset businesses.
Okay, excellent. Well, now what about artificial intelligence? That seems to be a big growing, even for use for marketing purposes. Where do you see, artificial intelligence opportunities of the future?
To me, it's like it's a tool. It's not a business; it's a tool. So you're right. Like, can you use artificial intelligence to better market? Yeah. Could you use artificial intelligence with machine learning and things to run better assembly? Yes. Like, will Amazon soon have warehouses where there are no people and it's lights out, being driven by integration of AI into a number of scenarios for automation? For sure. I think it's an innovation that will fit into every business in various ways. Really, everybody running a business has to say, how can I be more efficient, more accurate with it? There'll be experts in it. I'm for sure not one, but like I see it even in telecom, datacom, why are there people running scanning stations at airports? Like, seriously, I'm almost positive that a combination of the scanning, machine learning, AI can do a way better job than the people on the keyboard rolling the mouse, talking to their coworker, eating a sandwich maybe. So like, I just think it's going to constantly do it. Now the threat's going to be probably takes out a lot of functions necessary for people. And one of the companies I got involved with is in like the driverless car technology space, Innoviz. And at the end of the day, if they're fully successful, traffic jams disappear, but maybe truck drivers do too. So these things, they're interesting to see where they might go.
Yeah. So if I was to give you $1 million right now, Bruce, to start your own company, what would you invest in?
With that sum, I would focus on how do I take various types of proteins from fields, crops, and turn them into products that you want to buy. Because I think like Beyond Meat and stuff has just been the starting point. I think there's a massive next wave happening where people are more thoughtful about where they get their protein, how clean it is, how healthy they are. Because I think COVID's a reset, and the question people are going to have is, how do I rebuild? And I think with $1 million, you could do something in that space very quickly. You could come up with a single product SKU that actually is really good. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried this product you can get in Canada now called Just Eggs, JUST eggs. They're not eggs. What they are is delicious. And they're made with mung beans, and you can buy them at like Whole Foods, various spots. That SKU is like one of the hottest moving SKUs in Whole Foods. So when I look at things like people are going to care what they want to eat, with $1 million, you can probably have a bit of science in a first launch.
Excellent. So Bruce, I mean, most people have achieved the success that you have, would have their private jet, move down to California, driving their Lambo, but I don't think you even own your own car last time I checked. So is this a Bruce Linton thing, or do you think this is a Canadian thing about values?
It's probably a Bruce issue. So yeah, part of the reason I never let people, I didn't like if people bought fancy cars in companies, is their status. And they're intended to tell people who have less that you have a lot, which really is to say, stay away from me or honor me fakely and stuff. And so the reason I don't like all these things is I don't think it actually invites people into a comfortable conversation. I don't want to, I don't wish to drive around in something that says to people, I have something better than you, therefore take the rest of the sentence. I think they create barriers that don't make the next step at all helpful. So I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff. Like, if you need to have something fancy to make you feel good about yourself, that's great. But you might also try other ways to do it too. Like, you might go talk to yourself more positively. And so I don't like barriers to conversations with everybody.
Oh, no, Bruce, one thing I saw an interview with you recently, and I thought it was amazing the strategy that you have in negotiations, where you would talk to a company that might be doing an acquisition with, and you'd say, what if I told you when to sell your company, and it, like, building up that trust. Talk to a little bit about that strategy for negotiations.
Well, I think that's related. When I was raising capital for Canopy, about 9 months before legalization happened, 10 months. And I would go to see accounts in New York, wherever, and I would say, I'm here to tell you when you should sell my stock. And usually when you go in to raise money, you're not telling people when to sell. And I would say, I think that there's so many variables in legalization. The anticipation is going to be amazing. The news coverage could be huge, constant, turned out it was, which should drive increase in share value. But I don't know if it's going to correlate with the reality, because realities usually take longer to fulfill than anticipation. And so you should think about selling at least half or 3/4 of your position, maybe in September, before the October event. They said, well, nobody comes in here and tells us when to sell. And I said, well, how much do you own? None. So now I'm going to tell you how much you should buy and why. And so it's just, to me, when you go to an event where you want to achieve something, I don't think there's any obligation to follow precedents of what others have done or what you did before. But think about the context when you're arriving and say, how do I make this something that at the end of the day in the week, this is the most memorable logic they had, and they want to apply it, which means you get what you want.
Yeah, I love it. That's fantastic. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insight with us on innovation and change strategies. It's I think of you like a futurist, and I love your new look, by the way. It reminds me of one of those math games that I had when I was a kid. To the professor, where you have to do the maybe we could start a new math game, call it like Professor Linton's math or something.
Well, that's better. I've had a lot of people wonder what's going on. I said, listen, I don't have anywhere to go. There's no barbers open, as we all know. And, at least you didn't call me Gandalf like one of my US friends did on one show. So thank you.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much, Bruce. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you. Nice talking. Bye-bye.